Thank you, Senator Ernst. Let me recognize Senator Warren via WebEx.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Admiral Fowler and General VanHerck for being here today. We appreciate the work that you're doing. General VanHerck, COVID-19 vaccinations are well underway all across our country, and the DOD is helping people get vaccinated. Each day, millions more Americans are receiving hope in the form of these vaccines as we move closer to defeating this pandemic. But the data show that the vaccines aren't reaching every community equally. Death rates for Black Americans and Native Americans, Native Alaskans, are nearly twice as high as the death rates in white communities. But the vaccines have disproportionately gone to white Americans. Although vaccine demographic data are incomplete at this point, it appears that only about 7% of the 65 million administered doses have gone to Black Americans. So, General VanHerck, several thousand of the troops you command have been deployed to assist the federal government's vaccination efforts. Can you explain how Northern Command made decisions about the deployment of vaccine teams to ensure that communities of color are getting the vaccines that they desperately need?
Senator, absolutely. United States Northern Command does not make the decision where teams go. That's due through the FEMA process, and we answer to their mission assignment and go to the locations determined by that interagency process.
Fair enough. Do you know if FEMA is prioritizing communities of color?
In my discussions with the acting director, Mr. Fenton, they do take all considerations in from state and local officials, governors that are asking for support, and factoring in those specifics. And based on the need of where the transmission rates are the highest, they do take all that in from my discussions.
Well, it's hard then to explain why we're down at 7% vaccination rate for Black Americans. Can I ask you to commit that in future discussions, as you're talking about how to deploy these teams, that you will support making sure that we're making adequate vaccination efforts in communities of color?
Senator, I commit to you that I'm agnostic with regards to where we provide support, and I'll work closely with the FEMA team to make sure we do that.
Well, I'd like to hear that you're not agnostic, but that you're really committed to helping in the communities of color that are being hit hardest and where we're seeing the highest death rates. You know, I'm also concerned. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I apologize. I am fully committed. I thought I said that the second part.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I hope so. I'm also concerned about reports of Russian misinformation campaigns against the vaccine that are aimed at reducing the number of Americans willing to get vaccinated. Can you just say a word about what strategies is Northern Command using to combat this misinformation?
Senator, it's an information and education campaign, primarily within our own forces. I'm happy to report to you that we have approximately 85% acceptance rate within the command. In my discussions with the Secretary of Defense and within the interagency, we've talked and shared the lessons learned about how to educate and also exploit or expose the disinformation. So I think that's crucial to combine both the education aspect and exposing the disinformation.
Oh, thank you. You know, this pandemic hasn't affected all Americans equally. Black and brown communities have disproportionately suffered from COVID-19, and its effects will likely be felt for years. Northern Command and the federal government's vaccination efforts must prioritize the hardest hit communities, and I hope that you will continue to work hard to ensure that the vaccine goes to those who need it most. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Tillis, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your decades of service. General VanHerck, I want to go back and just finish or make sure I understood. With respect to any DOD resources supporting local mission objectives around vaccine dissemination, you're there to basically provide personnel support after the decisions about where to administer the vaccines, which population should be prioritized. You're not actively involved in that prioritization process. Is that correct?
Senator, that is exactly correct.
Okay, thank you. Admiral, I had just maybe an addendum to the request that Senator Wicker made following on to Senator Shaheen's comments. This one graphic that shows China influence, I think what would be helpful in there is just to show American influence, but also to show the trend lines. My guess is, based on a comment that you made, they're trending in the wrong direction. So I think it would just be helpful when you provide that graphic to show us the areas, the heat map on where we really need to muster more resources. On the TCO graphic, you all summarized the disruption in terms of narcotics. I think 303 metric tons in FY20. How does that compare to FY19, and what are the trend lines for FY21?
In overall amounts, Senator, it's comparable. But what's significant about FY20 is the impact of global pandemic. So we know that for a time, the narco traffickers went to ground and didn't push as much of their product. And then when they did, because a lot of border controls were tighter and the methods of delivery were harder because economies had shut down, and they ride their traffic on the backs of the economy, so they were having difficulty getting precursor chemicals and so on. When they did start pushing it, it was in smaller loads in different routes. What's significant about the DOD's performance, and as part of the whole nation effort, what we do is we detect and monitor and pass that off to law enforcement, is that we never stepped back, we stepped up in the face of pandemic, and we accounted for a significant increase of the amount that we targeted. So while the total amount was the same, our percentage of getting at effective targets was up, and that was because we did have a modest increase in resources throughout the year. We had the United States Navy stepped up at the direction of the SecDef with Navy ships, additional P-8s, and the Coast Guard sustained their always excellent support. And what we saw is when the U.S. stayed on the field, our partners stayed on the field. So overall, we held the line as part of the effort. We'll never interdict our way out, but we've got to keep pressure on that part of the supply chain. The Colombians did their part. They had a record eradication year. Where we need to go next is in the finances, into their data, into that source of their power, and really break the center of gravity of these organizations. And I think we can do that more effectively with a better, effective targeting and whole government approach here in the U.S. and training our partners to do the same.
Thank you. Something that would be helpful, if you don't have it available, I'd also be interested in a similar update on human trafficking disruption. If we could just get that submitted for the record, I would appreciate it. At the southern tip of your area of responsibility, General VanHerck, and Admiral, the northern, what's the change in posture? What's the environment like now as compared to, say, this time last year? I mean, military presence, I know even at the southern border, the southwest border of the United States, we had stepped up Mexican military presence. What is that? How would you summarize that today? And then also the southern Mexico border and border states. What's their posture there trying to manage flow of immigrants moving across those borders now compared to a year ago?
I'll go first. From the Mexicans' perspective, they're tremendous partners. We have a fantastic military to military.
Are they maintaining the same sort of operations tempo that they have for the past year or so?
They are. They've been great partners.
The same for Guatemala. They're committed. They're committed to doing the right thing here, but they're stressed with COVID and the other insecurity by the transnational criminal organizations. So their ability to surge more in the migrant problem set is limited.
Thank you. As we move forward with funding and NDA this year, I'd also be interested in maybe you submitting for the record key funding flows that are trending in the wrong direction that we should focus on when we get back to appropriations discussions and any sort of authorities you may need in the NDA. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tillis, and let me recognize Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank both of our panelists for their service to our country, and we appreciate very much you being here today. Admiral Fowler, I don't think it's possible to overstate the threats our adversaries are posting in your area of responsibility in AFRICOM because they know whatever investments they make in South America and Africa are cheap and will pay dividends in the future. At the end of February, U.S. Army South finished pre-deployment training for Operation Alamo Shield to prepare 1st Security Force Assistant Brigade personnel for future missions in Colombia, Honduras, and Panama. In addition to our state partnership program's ongoing training and advising operations like this one on the crucial for promoting interoperability and relationship building your area of responsibility. So my question would be, what specific training programs in Southcom going to develop to increase the capabilities, the capacity, and to further combat the growing concern for corruption within the ranks of our partners, and especially with the migration that we have going on right now? Can't they play a bigger role in that, sir?
Senator, I'd like to commend the West Virginia Guard, which does fantastic work through the state partnership program with Peru, and has been an active participant in our exercise program. You cited the Security Force Assistance Teams that the United States Army has developed. That is exactly the right capability. It's small teams that focus on training. You think 4 or 5 people, and our partners want to emulate the professionalism of the United States Army, United States Navy, Coast Guard, Air Force, Marines. And that's the way forward. Stay engaged on the team, on the field with the small teams that train our partners' trainers in the professional use of force, that involve women, peace, and security training, that involve human rights training. This is the way to go, and we're continue to emphasize and strengthen those programs, Senator.
Thank you, sir. And to General VanHerck, our current major ballistic missile defense assets around the globe include the GBM-D, THAAD batteries, Aegis systems, and PAC-3 missile capability. As China and Russia continue to increase their influence abroad, I am concerned that their objectives provide them with the ability to deny us access, break apart our relationships, further corrupt governments, and ultimately place threats closer to the U.S. However, as we begin to think in terms of hypersonic threats, geographical location doesn't mean much anymore, and the importance of early detection and coordination between the combat commandments becomes an even more crucial concern. So our question is, as we continue to develop space-based sensor layers, what role do you see for NORTHCOM and NORAD in tracking threats in North America, as well as interfacing with other combatant commands to track threats such as hypersonics?
Senator, in my NORAD hat, we're directly responsible for integrated threat warning and attack assessment. So that's crucial. We will continue to play a crucial role for assessment of threats to the homeland, specifically from missile threats. I am concerned about the ability going forward to track and assess hypersonics. And so we must go to space. And in my recent discussions just this Friday, talking with John Hill at the Missile Defense Agency, they're moving out. What we have to provide is space-based capabilities to track hypersonics, especially as they maneuver. And those space-based capabilities have to provide fire control capability data to systems that will be able to engage hypersonics. That's crucial for that deterrence by denial aspect that I mentioned earlier that also contributes to overarching deterrence.
Is there a requirement for a liaison cell to at each of our combatant command that represents the other commands in order to build situational wellness to coordinate the efforts?
Senator, I believe Homeland Defense starts forward, and that means all combatant commands must be engaged and part of the overarching solution for Homeland Defense and missile defense.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. Let me now recognize Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your service. Good to see both of you again, Admiral. It's been a while. Thank you for all you're doing down south. General, I want to focus on some issues I know have already been mentioned. First, on missile defense. One I think, good news story. It doesn't make a lot of press, but in the last few years, there's been a strong bipartisan support in this committee, in this Congress, on building up our missile defenses. I think in part because of the threat from North Korea. However, there's been challenges, right? Right now we have 20 empty silos at Fort Greely. which makes no sense. Some estimates are it's going to be 10 years before we have missiles in there. Can you talk to me about that and why in the world aren't we filling those silos as soon as possible?
Senator, my goal would be to have additional capability and capacity as soon as possible. I continue to work close with John Hill at the Missile Defense Agency. My top priority is to stay on timeline to field additional capabilities against ballistic missiles that could attack our homeland.
And isn't that in part because there's intel that given the rate of what North Korea is producing in terms of nukes and intercontinental ballistic missiles, that their capability could overwhelm our capabilities as early as 2025?
Senator, I'd like to have that conversation in a classified environment. I remain extremely concerned about the capacity of the ballistic missile defense system going forward.
And would quickly fielding the NGI help with addressing that challenge?
The sooner we can field the NGI, the better for addressing that challenge.
There was an article in a defense media news source recently saying that the NGI decision is on the Deputy Secretary of Defense's desk, and yet it's being delayed. Some are thinking that she might kind of use this as a budget-cutting tool to say, maybe we don't need it. Is that a good idea to delay this and have the Pentagon say we don't need NGI right now?
Senator, I'll stay out of the policy aspect of that.
Well, you've kind of already dumped into it, so let me get your personal opinion on that. Is that a good idea for the Deputy Secretary or the Secretary to say, I'm going to cut, let's figure out where we can cut the budget. Let's cut the budget on the system that protects the entire United States of America from a clear and growing threat. Is that a good idea?
Again, that's a policy decision. My perspective is about the risk, and I remain very concerned about the risk of having a capable ballistic missile defense system against future capacity changes and capability changes by threats.
Would the risk increase if we cut the NGI program? In your personal opinion?
In my opinion, cutting that would reduce our capability to defend against increased capacity and capability of any threats.
Mr. Chairman, this is a huge issue, and I think we as a committee has been very bipartisan, need to send a message to the Pentagon like, hey, fund this now. It's clear it would be a risk to the country. Let me turn to the Arctic. I know there's been a number of discussions already. The good news is in his confirmation hearing, Secretary Austin, the Deputy Secretary, Dr. Hicks, both said they were committed to this committee to fully fund the new Arctic strategies. I think the Army is going to introduce it today with regard to fully funding the different service-oriented strategies. Senator Wicker talked about icebreakers. It's good we're finally building them. It's taking too long. There is this leasing option that the Trump administration was looking at the end of the administration, and now the Biden administration is looking at hard. Do you think that's a good idea to close this icebreaker gap with the opportunity to lease icebreakers, get them home ported in America's Arctic, which is Alaska? What's your thought on that?
Senator, that's a policy decision. I have a requirement for capability. I'm agnostic to what provides that capability.
But you think we need the capability?
Absolutely.
Good. So do I. So does this committee, by the way. Let me ask one final thing. There's going to be a meeting, high-level meeting between our diplomats and Chinese diplomats in Anchorage Thursday and Friday. We talk about Alaska in terms of the Arctic, but as you know, General, Alaska also is critical for the Asia-Pacific, particularly as we look at dispersing of our forces. We had the PACOM commander here last week talking about challenges perhaps in the Taiwan Strait as early as 5 to 6 years from now. How important is it, do you think, that the Chinese, when they come to Alaska, see that there's, within the end of this year, going to be over 100 fifth-generation fighters based in Alaska that can get to the Taiwan Strait probably in 6 hours?
Senator, Alaska is a strategic location. It's a strategic location for homeland defense, something that we must preserve and preserve that capability. I think it's important that they see our capabilities. It's part of our overarching deterrence.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Let me recognize Senator Peters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, thank you for your testimony here today and for your service every day. General VanHerck, a seldom discussed area of the civil support mission is chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear response. And this is good considering the subject matter, but as long as supporting units are resourced appropriately, we can be more assured. So my question is to you, sir, is that the Command and Control CBRN Response Element B has experienced a cumulative 25% decrease in funding over the past 3 years. And I understand these are Title 32 funds, and I know that you don't control those funds, but the effect should at least be of concern to you because of the unit augments Northern Command for CBRN and DSCA more broadly. So my question to you, General, is does the decrease for the Guard and Reserve C2 element reflect your priorities or those of the Army North and Joint Task Force Civil Support?
First, I would say I remain confident in my ability to provide support in case there's an incident, chemical, biological, radiological, in the continental United States. With regards to the specific prioritization, I would say that I need to get further detail on the cut for Title 32. I'm not tracking that, but we're well integrated with state and local authorities and have our capability ready to go, some of it on hours notice, others on days notice. So I'm confident in my ability to perform that mission.
Well, I appreciate that, and you're willing to take a look at that and get back to us. We could follow up with you.
I will.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Admiral Fowler, the Southern Command takes a non-traditional approach to intelligence, integrating public information with advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. My question is this in-house RDT&E effort unique to the Southern Command?
The non-traditional efforts that you speak of through our Special Operations Force looks at big data and what the enemy's doing in big data is commercial available information, machine learning, artificial intelligence. It is a unique effort that is now being replicated, and it is a key area that we need to emphasize in our intelligence efforts going forward, appropriately working within the U.S. whole government. This data, it's data that my shipmate, General VanHerck, talks about, and stovepipes in that data that we create with our own policies have to be broken down so we can leverage that to understand what the threat's doing. And certainly our malign actors that are working this hemisphere, China and Russia, they don't respect laws when they look at exploiting that type of data for their own benefit.
You mentioned some of that's being replicated. Are you aware of some similar successful methods with other combatant commands or the intelligence community?
We have another a pilot program that we've worked to look at cryptocurrency. In this hemisphere, with only 8% of the world's population, 60% of the cryptocurrency is being leveraged, and that's because of the plethora of transnational criminal organizations that are wreaking violence in the hemisphere. And so that's a concern. So how do we get at that center of gravity to break the backs of these threats, working with Treasury and other partners in support of? We're not looking to take the lead here. We're looking to play the appropriate role. So there are efforts, and those efforts are, frankly, funded every year on unfunded requests or through additional support from Congress. So we need to appropriately sustain that going forward.
Thank you. On Thursday, NORTHCOM will begin a global information dominance exercise, and I understand that 9 of the 11 combatant commands are planning to participate in this exercise, which is meant to prototype and test a set of AI tools. And I know that there was some discussion about Pathfinder earlier, but the intent is to support joint all-domain command and control implementation. So my question for you, General, is can you explain why these types of exercises are absolutely critical to our modernization and readiness efforts and why NORTHCOM is leading this initiative?
Absolutely, Senator. From the NORTHCOM and NORAD perspective, we view data and information as a strategic asset. And so we're conducting these exercises to bring everybody together to show the true value and the importance of the strategic ability that we can utilize information and data. And so we look forward to continuing to partner with the combatant commands and services and bringing them together to demonstrate capabilities that can not only help us in conflict, but more importantly, help us de-escalate in crisis and to deter in competition.
Great. Thank you, General.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Kramer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank both of you for being here. Generals, appreciate your service, Admiral and General. I'm going to start with you, Admiral, because early on, in response to a question from Senator Inhofe, you had cited the fact that you only get 1% of the ISR. And that was fairly stunning to me, especially since the Air Force has been trying to retire the RQ-4s and cut the production of the MQ-9s, two systems that we're very familiar with in North Dakota, of course. They're operated quite effectively out of our state, one by the Air Force in Grand Forks, the other by our Guard in Fargo. And one of the reasons that they use for wanting to cut production or retire, and realizing some of it's they want to save money for new systems, and that's noble, and we need to make some tough decisions about that. But one of the reasons they use is that these platforms aren't survivable in near peer competition. So my question to you, Admiral, is could you use RQ-4s and MQ-9s in your theater, and is there a significant threat to the survival of these platforms at Southcom?
Well, as you mentioned, Senator, we received less than 1% of the DOD ISR, and it's a prioritization, and there's global challenges, and I recognize how that plays out. This is a good environment in Southcom for unmanned. We have had, for the first time ever, an MQ-9 through the past year, and we have Customs and Border Protection MQ-9 as well. And they've proven their utility because they can stay on station for a long time and stare at the threats. They can also learn in general about the environment beyond the transnational criminal organization threats. So we have the understanding that we need to ensure that we're appropriately postured moving forward.
Thank you, Admiral. General, thank you for our discussion last week. I enjoyed it very much, found it very interesting, learned a lot, as is often the case. And one of the things that you and I talked about, of course, was the fact that NORAD Northcom participated with the Air Force Research Laboratory in an over-the-horizon study that included some testing at Camp Grafton, North Dakota, our National Guard camp, as part of the OSD Coalition Warfare Program-funded Arctic HF surveillance program. And we were told, of course, that the results exceeded expectations. My question to you is, do you still see the need for an over-the-horizon radar system and capability, and do you expect further, more advanced testing anytime soon?
Senator, my focus and top priority is domain awareness, and over-the-horizon radar would certainly contribute to domain awareness. My understanding is right now, with regards to the test that you're talking about, the current Northern Strategic Approaches Study is with the Air Force. We're waiting for that to come out. I talked to General Brown on Friday about that. Once that report comes out, we'll be in a better position to see on the way forward with the research lab or however we're going to pursue that. But domain awareness is at the top of my integrated priority list.
Thank you for that, and thanks for that answer, and thanks for following up with General Brown. One other question for you, General VanHerck. There's a lot less military presence between Michigan and Montana in the northern, obviously along the northern border than there used to be during the Cold War. Even though, I mean, one could argue that there are more threats in the Arctic and from missiles coming over the Arctic even than there were during the Cold War. If there was a threat coming over the pole through Saskatchewan, say, do you have enough fighters, tankers, missile warning, missile defense systems to meet that threat?
Senator, day to day, I'm confident in my ability to defend against the threat that we have. Day to day, I'm postured primarily against a 9/11 type of response. If indications and warning or a crisis evolved, I would go ahead and ask for additional forces. At that time, if I was allocated additional forces or not, I'd have to make a broader assessment in my ability to defend.
Well, and as you mentioned, obviously, domain awareness is the critical aspect to being prepared. Is the radar coverage for that area modern enough to track any threat reliably, do you believe?
Senator, I remain concerned about domain awareness in the north. With the legacy North Warning System, If we apply capabilities such as Pathfinder, that'll increase my capability, but more broadly, we need to get after it with more modern systems. Systems not designed to go after a stovepipe, single domain, single threat. We need systems capable of going after everything from small counter UAS to ballistic missiles that are able to be efficient and effective.
Excellent, thank you. You're both awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. Now I'd like to recognize Senator Rosen via WebEx.
Thank you, Chairman Reed, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here and for your great service to our nation. I'd like to speak a little bit about Hezbollah in the Western Hemisphere, because for decades, Iran's proxy Hezbollah has maintained an active presence in the Western Hemisphere, engaging in terrorist activities, drug trafficking, and money laundering. In 1994, Iran and Hezbollah bombed a Jewish community center in Argentina, killing 85 civilians and injuring more than 300. The Treasury Department has sanctioned numerous Hezbollah-linked operatives and entities in the Western Hemisphere for links to transnational organized crime. So, Admiral Fowler, in your written testimony, you stated that Hezbollah's external operations arm is responsible for at least 3 high-profile attacks in the region and 3 other planned operations that were disrupted. Can you elaborate on the threat that Hezbollah poses to U.S. interests in the Western Hemisphere, and if its presence is growing, where do you see it growing?
Senator, these threats go right back to Iran, the single largest state sponsor of terror in the world, and the long arm of Iranian malfeasance is felt globally and in this hemisphere. Significant Lebanese diaspora, Lebanese Hezbollah receives funding support, and they're intertwined with Iranian state-sponsored terrorists in ways that undermine global security and security in this hemisphere. We have seen an increase in presence of Iran activities in Venezuela to support the illegitimate Maduro regime, increasing the readiness of some of their defense systems. And we have seen the continued involvement with the diaspora and economic fundraising, particularly down in the tri-border region neighboring Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil.
Well, you know, you're speaking of the diaspora, that is extremely important. So how can we improve information sharing with our regional partners to identify and disrupt Hezbollah's activity in Latin America?
One of the very positive things that I've seen over the last couple of years is the extent to which we have increased our information sharing with key partners, Brazil, Colombia. We rely on them. They're like-minded democracies to share information so that we understand the threat. We've expanded that information sharing significantly this year. It is key to moving forward, and it's built on longstanding trust that we have that's born out of professional military education. We have security cooperation programs that work to build professional intelligence services. We do this through our 333 program, and sustaining those programs are very important. During the past year, we've been able to expand modestly those programs in cybersecurity, and that will really be critical to understanding both the threat that's posed by Iran and their state-sponsored or terrorist organizations and other nation-state actors like China.
Thank you. I'd like to move on and ask General VanHerck a little bit about our COVID response and support. You've been so terrific. You've deployed Navy hospital ships. At the start of the pandemic, you've cared for coronavirus patients at Army field hospitals. And now, of course, President Biden is directing states to open up vaccination appointments to all American adults by May 1st. So I'm curious what your role may be in this new mission. So how is NORTHCOM generating and deploying forces to support the vaccine distribution and administrative mission? And specifically, as members of the military and their families get vaccinated, and once military installations are covered, do you have coordinated plans or have you had preliminary conversations with local civil authorities to leverage the capacity you have on the bases for the local communities to get the vaccines deployed?
Senator, we work with not only local communities, state authorities, and our local bases to ensure that we follow the DOD's published guidelines along with the CDC as well. And so I'm confident going forward that we'll continue to provide that support. We've worked with the department. I put in a request for 100 teams, 50 Type 1 teams, the most capable of delivering about 6,000 shots per day, and also 50 Type 2 teams. As far as sourcing those, the Joint Staff works with the services and the departments to calculate and come up with sourcing solutions. The Secretary approves those and allocates them to me, and we work through FEMA for the actual location and mission assignment on how we're going to continue executing President Biden's mission to get where he needs to be on 1 July.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Scott, please.
Thank you, Chairman Reed. Admiral Follow, thank you for the conversation last week. As we all know, the fundamental problem in our hemisphere is Cuba. They're the root of all the instability in Latin America. They terrorize their own citizens, they steal from their own citizens, and they support dictators in Latin America, such as Maduro in Venezuela and Ortega in Nicaragua. How important is it in your role for the Cuban regime to not have resources, to do everything we can as a country to make sure that the Castro regime doesn't have the resources to terrorize their own citizens and be involved in these other countries?
In addition to the nefarious activity you cite, Senator, Cuba and Russia and China are actively engaged just miles from our home state. And it's concerning as we see that relationship going forward. So to the extent to which we can prevent those kind of relationships from developing and from Cuba enhancing its capabilities, it's very important. And one of our assets, one of our real strategic toeholds in that effort is our naval station at Guantanamo Bay.
Is it important that they don't have resources?
I think it's extremely important that we prevent the Cubans and their communists from doing what they're doing in Venezuela, where they're keeping Maduro in power and where they're undermining. We see them actively undermining free and fair elections and democracies across the hemisphere. So yes, Senator.
What's their involvement in Venezuela now, and are they part of provoking Venezuela's aggression against Guyana?
Cuba's Praetorian Guard keeps Maduro in power. They're there in the thousands. They own the intelligence service alongside Russia primarily, and Iran and China to a lesser extent. They're supporting, maintaining Maduro's defense systems and security forces. And undoubtedly, that then gives Maduro the capacity and capability to rattle the saber and threaten the neighbors, and also, frankly, allows a safe haven for narco-traffickers and narco-terrorists, which is what Venezuela has become. It's hell for its citizens, and it's heaven for the terrorists.
So what can your command do to confront the reports of illegal shipping activity out of Venezuela?
We're actively involved with all our interagency partners to track that, learn as much as we can about it, and then provide that information to our diplomats who can call it out and come up with solutions that support the whole government efforts to shift Venezuela to democracy.
Have you or our government through sanctions been able to do much to stop the flow of oil from Venezuela to Cuba?
The pressure has worked. The Maduro regime has been denied resources, but in any of these things, they're very clever when you have no regard for rule of law and corruption fuels everything you do, and you're supported by nation-state actors like Russia and China. You can circumvent rules and laws, and they've been able to keep the flow up just enough to maintain their economy, particularly the regime's grip on that economy and its people on life support.
Can you talk a little bit about the humanitarian crisis both in Cuba and Venezuela as a result of the Castro and Maduro regimes?
Well, the United Nations Human Rights Report lays it out. The atrocities that the regime has committed on the people are beyond compare in this hemisphere, and have created the largest migrant crisis this hemisphere has ever seen. Some 5 million migrants that have swelled the the services and of all the social services. It's why we deployed hospital ship Comfort twice in a year's period prior to the pandemic. It's a credit to Colombia and Brazil and other democracies that they've been able to handle it as effectively. I commend them. And similarly in Cuba, it's and that's we've had past migrant crisis, and we have a mission set to prepare with Homeland Security for that. We've seen a slight uptick this year in migrants coming out of Cuba. We're watching it very closely, and undoubtedly, again, it's due to the brutal economic conditions and the repression that we see, and we study that intensely in our intelligence and information sharing efforts.
Thank you, Admiral Fowler. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott, and let me recognize Senator Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Fowler, you and I had an extended discussion last week about activity in the region, as well as some of the push factors contributing to migration flows that are exacerbating the challenging situation at the southern border. I'd like to focus on the strength of criminal organizations in the region. A recent report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies found that the countries of the Northern Triangle lose more than 3% of their GDP to organized crime each year. These TCOs also contribute to outsized homicide rates and undermine governance and security in the region. The bottom line is they're in some ways better resourced than state actors and have proven capable of trafficking guns, money, drugs, and people. It's a major problem. Given these dynamics, do you feel you have the authority necessary to conduct operations that will effectively disrupt their activity in the long term?
They, as you mentioned, Senator, they control territory. They're well-funded. They have a strength of in close to 200,000 when you look across the region, which is on par with all the police and military forces in total. So a powerful enemy to host nations, democracies, and direct impact on our homeland defense here in the United States. Our role is appropriately in support, detection, and monitoring, which means we find out as much as we can, and where we have authorities, we pass that off to law enforcement to interdict. And then we work at building our host nation partners' capacity. We are short in intelligence assets. We have less than 1% of those assets. We need additional capacity to build our partners so that they can take care of this problem themselves. And we have received about the right amount of presence, but it's important we stay on the field. An example of that is our Joint Task Force Bravo, which is a small team of about 700 soldiers and airmen and Marines at Sotocano, Honduras, that can support law enforcement with lift, with some intelligence, but more importantly, can rapidly respond. We saw that this past fall, 2 back-to-back hurricanes, major hurricanes, and we saved hundreds of lives rapidly. And what that does, builds trust and actually helps us build the case for these partnerships and sustainable security long-term.
Earlier, you stressed, and you did again, that the 1% of ISR funding goes to Southcom. Is that correct?
It's 1% of the overall assets and capabilities, Senator.
So, but beyond that, if you were to wanted to ramp up the effectiveness of disrupting their activity, what other resources would you need?
Senator, we've got to come up with a more effective whole government effort in the United States and really get at mapping these networks. We're doing that, but it's nascent. It needs more effort. And finding the center of gravity, what's key to each organization, and then going at disrupting, defeating, or deterring that. And most of that is a law enforcement or a judicial or a partner nation effort with Southcom in support. So we play a critical role, but it's got to be more holistically designed here in the U.S. We can't interdict our way out of this.
Well, thank you, Admiral. General VanHerck, you mentioned in your testimony the Pathfinder program as a complement to the work done by the Defense Innovation Unit. also the importance to being able to rapidly field capabilities of the future. As chair of the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee, this is something I've been thinking a lot about. Are you looking into technologies like artificial intelligence to assist in processing the increasingly large volumes of data that come from our sensor systems?
Senator, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Pathfinder does exactly that, uses machine learning and additional capabilities. We must go down that path to operate in a timely and efficient, effective manner.
Any sense if our adversaries are doing the same thing, using these technologies?
Absolutely, Senator, especially China. They're actively moving forward with artificial intelligence.
And then finally, are there any research gaps that you see that you think we should be investing more in?
Not specific to research. I would say we must go to space sooner and space-based capabilities that give us persistent domain awareness. That's where I would be focusing my efforts right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Let me recognize Senator Hawley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. General VanHerck, let me start with you, and let me thank you on behalf of all Missourians. It's great to see a fellow Missourian here as before, and we're very proud of you and your service, so thank you for being here. Let's come back to this question of the border. Customs and Border Patrol issued a new batch of operational statistics last week that showed that CBP encountered more than 100,000 persons attempting entry across the southern border in February. That's about a 200% increase over this time last year. They also show that the number of unaccompanied minors attempting to cross our border, as children, has doubled since January, and the number of family units has more than doubled from January to February. Give us a sense of how the surge of migrants is helping or hindering the cartel's operations along the border.
Senator, I'm not aware of necessarily how it hinders or helps. I think it's a symptom of the transnational criminal organization problem that we actually see. As Admiral Fowler pointed out, hurricanes, transnational criminal organizations, all the murders contribute directly to what we're seeing on the border, which includes the migration that you're alluding to.
I think it's this today that the Secretary of Homeland Security said that we're on pace now for a 20-year high in border encounters, a 20-year record, which is pretty astounding considering some of the previous surges we've seen, for instance, in 2014. Is it fair to say that we've got a crisis now at the southern border, General?
Senator, I'll stay out of the politics of whether it's a crisis or not. It's absolutely a homeland defense issue that I'm concerned about. I'm concerned because it creates opportunities, it creates vulnerabilities, and we have to be postured for each of those. The vulnerabilities that it creates for us is instability. It creates instability in governance. It creates instabilities in the rule of law, if you will, in neighboring countries. Those will be exploited by countries such as China, Russia, Iran. So for me, it's a homeland defense and a national security imperative to take a look at that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's also a humanitarian crisis, and for one, I'm not afraid of the word crisis. I can't understand why this administration is afraid of the word crisis, and given the unbelievable humanitarian issues we're seeing at the border and the record surge that we're on pace for, I think this administration's inability to admit that their own policies are causing this crisis and the effect it is having in terms of emboldening the cartels, as you're saying. We know that nobody crosses that southern border without the permission and indeed without the profit of the cartels. Nobody. It's a wholly run criminal enterprise on the southern end of the border. And this administration's inability to grapple with that and do something about it, I think, is frankly astounding. And we're seeing it just day on day on day grow worse and worse. Let me ask you this, General. We've sent billions of dollars in security, in money, security assistance to the Mexican government over the past 14 years. Yet we are seeing, as you just alluded to, escalating violence, even more drugs headed northward. Those drugs make their way into every state of the union, including our home state, my home state of Missouri. In your assessment, why has our security assistance to Mexico fallen so short of its security objectives? I mean, why have not we been able to achieve more considering the prodigious sums that we've invested?
First, I would talk to Homeland Security about the problem. It's a law enforcement issue, much of it coming across the border. But I would tell you that the Mexican military, we have an incredibly close partnership, and they're doing incredible things down there. With that being said, I think, as Admiral Fowler alluded to, we need a whole-of-government strategy. You know, the arms that are arming these transnational criminal organizations come right here from the United States of America, and they flow south. In addition to that, the money that they're creating is being generated by precursors coming from Asia, China businesses and industry, if you will, that flows in there. So we have to take a broader approach to get after this, which includes a whole-of-government effort and prioritizing and putting resources to the problem.
Speaking of China, Admiral, let me come to you in just a little bit of time I've got remaining. You wrote in your testimony that China is seeking to establish global logistics and basing infrastructure in our hemisphere in order to project and sustain military power. What kind of presence do the Chinese forces maintain in the Western Hemisphere today that we ought to be concerned about?
Have to ask ourselves the question, why is China trying to achieve deep water ports in Dominican Republic, Jamaica, El Salvador, Panama Canal's key strategic ground, Argentina? They're using economic influence and access to set the conditions for the blue water navy that they've built.
Very good. I think we're going to have a closed session, aren't we, Mr. Chairman? So,
We're planning that, yes.
okay, I'll have a few more questions for you then. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Now let me recognize Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here today and what you've done for our homeland and our hemisphere. General, it's been 20 years since we've had an attack on our homeland. Thank you for that. And everybody at Northcom, hard work that you've done. You know, I very much agree with you what you said about outpacing our competitors. I'm proud to say that in Alabama we're working to leap ahead in the areas of hypersonics, working very hard on that. And right now the world's largest and fastest hypersonic wind tunnel is under construction in Huntsville, and I know they're working at a fast pace. Admiral, I enjoyed a conversation last week and enjoyed your straight talk. Hope the American people will start getting a sense of urgency. You have your hands full in Southcom, no doubt about it. Between transnational criminal organizations, Russia and China, you're a busy man. I do believe for a moment that the PRC's plan in our hemisphere are benign, and I hope that it will not take a Chinese aircraft carrier sailing between Florida and the Bahamas for Americans to wake up to the fact that the CCP wish to dominate the world stage. I hope it doesn't take something like that. You know, the work that both of you have done for Southcom and Northcom does for our nation is incredible, important to maintaining our strategic military objectives. Many of the items for both of you in the areas of responsibility strongly impact my home state in Alabama. Admiral, following the 2018 National Defense Strategy is something I personally believe in a good way to position our forces to thinking towards the future. Can you explain how Southcom is important to this strategy, and specifically, how would you describe China's strategic objectives in a 5 or 10-year timeline?
Well, I think that China seeks economic dominance globally, and their strategic objective is to be the dominant global power, unquestionably, and they'll do that in whatever way possible to ensure they have the preeminence of the Communist Party. In this hemisphere, it's across all fronts. It's not just economics. Typically, we think about that, and we have this fallacy that's just economics. It's in the military realm. They've recognized that partners in this hemisphere can't afford a lot of equipment, so they've upped the game in gifts. And when they do offer military equipment, it's often through corrupt deals that we can't compete with. They've replicated our professional military education. They have ubiquitous IT solutions. They have created engineering and cyber scholarships for military personnel that goes beyond the kind of education and training that we offer in our IMET programs. They have expanded their defense attaché presence. They have at least turned a blind eye to a range of illegal activity, unregulated fishing, unreported fishing, illegal mining and logging. And all this is done in an environment fueled by corruption with no regard or little regard for human rights, and trying to right their version of the rules of the game. We've got to stay on the field to compete. We do that well. No one is better than the United States military, Department of Defense, but we've got to work hard and tirelessly with the sense of urgency that you mentioned to stay number one in the game and to be the best.
Thank you. General, in regards to our southern border security, we hear all the negatives. What do you think's improved the most in the last 4 years? And then what worries you most looking forward at the southern border?
I think the coordination between the department and the interagency with regards to, since 2018, has been probably the biggest improvement. With regards to what worries me most is about having domain awareness and the opportunities and vulnerabilities that I already talked about in our own Western Hemisphere for state actors such as China, Russia, or Iran in our own neighborhood due to instability, due to ungoverned areas and spaces. So I'm significantly concerned about what's going on right here in our own hemisphere and neighborhood.
You think we need a wall?
I'll stay out of the politics of a wall. Border security.
Not politics. You think we need one?
Well, border security is national security. We need to ensure that we have policies in place, laws are enforced to ensure that Homeland Defense does not become a more strategic issue from the borders.
Yeah. One thing I noticed coaching for 40 years and being in education is just the influx of drugs. You know, just take away everybody coming across the border, just the influx of drugs are killing our kids. We're losing 60,000 a year to overdose. I mean, that right there should be just an alarm that we've got to have something different.
Yeah, Senator, I agree with you. Actually, I believe the number this past year was approximately 80,000. That's unsatisfactory, and we have to get after that. And that's a symptom of that broader problem that I talked about, transnational criminal organizations that we can apply priority and resources to get after it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Now let me recognize Senator Blackburn via WebEx.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We so appreciate having the hearing today and getting the update. And Admiral Fowler, thank you for the time that you spent with me on the phone last week. General VanHerck, I want to go back to your statement on Pathfinder, the prototype Pathfinder data analytics project. This is the kind of project that I think attacks two primary concerns with DOD data streams. One is the stovepiping and the other is the need for modernization. And many times I sound like a broken record, if you will, by talking about what has happened with DOD through the years as things have become so stovepiped, and the need for this modernization because information is power. We all know that, but you have to be able to analyze, to share, and to make actionable that data. So my question for you is, how could the Pentagon better utilize some of these emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence, such as the data that we're getting via ISR, and the AI that is used by Pathfinder to really make that information accessible, shareable across platforms and divisions, and actionable when you're looking at how you implement plans for the future, how you change plans based on the information that you are getting?
Senator, first I would tell you I'm encouraged by the joint warfighting concept, which also has a supplement for information advantage that will help us move down this. As far as utilizing the data, I agree it's a strategic asset, if you will, data. We can utilize it to not only dominate in conflict, but to create deterrence day to day. So for example, as an operational commander, this data that's available to me, if I utilize it with applying artificial intelligence and machine learning, and then disseminate it to key decision makers, I'm able to position forces ahead of a competitor or adversary's actions, which creates deterrence. It's that deterrence by denial. But we must go faster in the department. And 30 years ago, the department led the way with innovations. Today, I think that paradigm has flip-flopped to where much of industry and Silicon Valley is leading the way forward, especially with regard to data. And so we need to take a look at our acquisition processes, our modernization processes, and potentially flip the paradigm to stay competitive.
Do you feel like that the Pentagon itself is flexible and agile enough to make these changes, utilize this data, make a change in a game plan immediately, and apply what they're learning from that intel?
I believe that the Pentagon has proven over history to be incredibly successful in adapting when we need to. It hasn't always been as fast, and that's one of the reasons I talk about it. We have to have some culture change. I would also tell you this may require some looks at policy. It may even require some looks at law to utilize data differently as we go forward. What we don't want to do is create capabilities that we can utilize, and the policy that we have and the laws that we have don't allow us to be successful with the data and the information that's available.
Thank you for that. I may come back to you for some specifics. Admiral Fowler, we've talked a lot about China this morning and the transnational organizations, but as you look at dealing with China, whether it is through fentanyl and drugs or Belt and Road or great power competition, what do you not have access to in Southcom that you need?
Well, as we've discussed, China is a global threat, and we've got to address that challenge holistically across the U.S. government. In the Southcom AOR, we have to be appropriately postured, so we need the right footprint of forces working with our embassies and our interagency team to stay engaged with our partner. So additional locations for presence, not permanent, but access is really critical moving forward.
So it's the teamwork concept with our allies, correct?
Correct, Senator.
Okay. Thank you all for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator, very much. And gentlemen, thank you for your testimony and your service to the nation. Let me remind my colleagues that upon adjournment, we will immediately move to SVC 217 for a classified briefing by Admiral Fowler about increasing Chinese influence in the Southcom area. There also is a vote scheduled for noon. So we will accomplish both. I'll see you shortly over there, Admiral Fowler. And General, thank you for your distinguished service at Northcom. No further business before the committee. I'll adjourn.